how can we mitigate the fear around change and anchor it in a strong why with either the mission that we're trying to accomplish or giving visibility into how we're going to improve our stakeholders' process.
Okay, so Laura, I did see on your LinkedIn that you take a customer and people first approach. So I would love to hear about your RevOps philosophy and how has your career impacted this?
Yeah, it's funny because I was in the seller world for a long time. And so I feel like now that I've made the transition over to operations, instead of having a customer facing role, really my stakeholders are the sellers and the revenue team. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, the processes and the changes that we're making within an organization, whether it's hyper growth or not, it really impacts the people frontline, and people are our biggest asset at the company. And so making sure that they are top of mind moving forward with how we are building organizations and we're making change. That's how I like to approach. It's, yeah. And I think that philosophy is, that's how I actually lead from a revenue ops perspective, because so much of our job is change management, is monitoring, is scrutinizing, how can we affect the top line revenue? But ultimately it is removing barriers from our stakeholders and making them more successful. So
that makes sense. So when it comes to adoptions of a new process and you have this people first approach, what do you think the key considerations are there?
Whew, there's a lot.
It's a long list.
Well, and it's funny that you asked that because I wanted to actually take it back like one step, because any process or change that you as a revenue organization or an operations manager are going to make, it is ultimately change. And us as humans, yes, we are adaptable to change, but we are very natural to resisting change. And I think that there's a stigma where some people might have an adverse reaction to change. Maybe it's am I going to like this change? What's on the other side? It is the unknown. And what I'm doing right now wrong? Or can I even do it? There's like some sort of fear or shame that comes around with change. And I think that ultimately is a barrier that gets put up first. And so coming to a change process with how can we mitigate the fear around change and anchor it in a strong why with either the mission that we're trying to accomplish or giving visibility into how we're going to improve our stakeholders' process. I think that's how you really have to boil it down to. And maybe I'm a crazy revenue operations person, but I do think that that's how you lead, is ultimately understanding that people are resistant to change, regardless if they know that it's good for them or not. And then leading through each element of the process, building a good framework around mitigating that fear.
Okay. Do you think there's a connection between the high performing champions and their ability to accept all these changes?
Oh, yes, I do. I think that maybe it's like the Carol Dweck growth mindset that maybe A players have. Maybe they have confidence that anything that comes to them, they're gonna tackle it, they're gonna understand it, and maybe not be afraid of potential failure or the unknown. I think experience is also key. Maybe they've been through some big changes like company acquisitions, or maybe a small change like a small forecasting process. I think having potential experience of understanding that change curve that they're going to go through and having a level of maturity of like, hey, we're going to get through this. I might be a little resistant at the first, but I know that this is good for me, and having that experience really does help. And I think A players do have that.
Okay. So how do you get these key players on board with adoption of a new process?
Yeah. Well, you're always going to have your early adopters. You're going to
Mhm.
be the people that, are either bringing the problem to your attention or raising their hand to say, yes, absolutely, we need to be doing this. And so I would lean into that community to really be the cheerleaders or influencers in this change process. And what I mean by that is, you don't always have to be a leader to be an influencer through change or in an organization. And so making sure that those people are a part of the process, knowing that they are then going to infiltrate the rest of maybe even the naysayers or those late adopters to a potential process change.
Mhm.
A couple of examples of things that we've done in the past is having like a group of change champions, and they're kind of infiltrated within. They might not have like a colored shirt or anything or a
Mm.
badge, but they really are the people that are on the front lines with those either naysayers or later adopters, that when something comes up and you're not there as the person who's implementing the process, they can say, you know what, this is actually going to be really great, and
Mm.
they can be your force multiplier of positivity throughout the process to help others see the better of the outcome of what's going to happen. And then also have them being able to report back and give feedback into where we potentially might be selling ourselves short. So no process is perfect. No rollout is perfect.
Mm.
You wouldn't be a RevOps leader planning a process without a plan B or C.
Mm.
So I think having that group a part of your planning process and the groundwork and getting that feedback back to you so that you as the implementer can adjust throughout the process is super key as well.
That's really cool. I like the part that you mentioned where you said leaders, they don't have to be the ones who can affect change, all the other
Yes.
people around can do that as well. That's cool. What about long-term adoption, Laura? What would you say your philosophies are there?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yes, and I think change comes in multiple phases. So you have your initial rollout or your change, and I think a lot of where the processes fall down in adoption is that we stop there. We stop the planning, like, hey, it's all rolled out, everything's great. I think there needs to be both a feedback and a reinforcement program
Mm.
built into this kind of iterative circle of how you're rolling out process. I mean, companies are moving at an exorbitantly fast pace right now, whether it's hiring new people. So you have to take in consideration like the new people that would be entering your organization. Do they know the process and where are they entering in their learning journey? Because every single person learns differently. And so making sure that you have different mediums of visual, written text, reinforcement, where I can go for help throughout that reinforcement process. It's going to make your adoption more sticky, as I call it.
Mm.
It's going to make sure that, hopefully by the time the process is rolled out, they'll forget the old way of doing it and they won't even remember it. And this will just become their new norm, but it's going to take time. And I think us that are implementing these new processes or changes need to realize that it's not
Mm.
an overnight, light switch, and we have to give people the space to change.
That's cool. So let's talk about tech. How does tech play a part in making things more sticky?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, I would plug the company I work with, but I'll talk super high level. I think we live in this world where we have 20 to 30 applications in our wheelhouse or our workflow that are trying to make us more efficient. And I think tech today should be so low barrier. One, you definitely need some sort of knowledge management system. So where's the source of truth being held? What type of documentation is at my fingertips? I think having something in place that gives constant feedback or communication in real time, something like a Slack or a Chatter or some sort of communication channel to
Mhm.
where you can see and data mine some of the keywords that are coming in. So, and then also understanding that contextual learning is a thing today. We live in our
Mm.
applications and we need to learn our applications in that moment of time when we have that question. And so there are a lot of tech companies out there that are bringing learning to the forefront of an individual, so they can actually self-service answer their own questions and not have to bog down the people that are implementing the change, whether it's RevOps or sales enablement or operations, and in general, they can actually self-serve. And then recreating that kind of water cooler talk or best practice. So who are those people that are doing the post change really well, and who are those that I can go to emulate that within my organization, and highlighting those people. So I think tech can, highlight top performers, can keep people communicating and connected through that process change. And then also bringing the learning and reinforcement like in the workflow where it makes sense and contextually when you need it. And I think that is super key today.
Okay, and that's why Speckit is so good.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, let's talk about how data is involved in this process.
Yeah. I mean, data is life. So I really believe it starts with selling your process idea of bringing in the data to either look at maybe what we're missing or what our opportunity is at the moment, and really quantifying that. So if I'm rolling out a new process or a plan or a change, and I'm saying this is going to reduce, something by X, that to me is a stakeholder or someone that needs to champion this, is maybe an executive. That gives me a visual reaction as to what impact I can make on the organization. And so I think if you can quantify early enough, so then you can track it throughout the process of, how are we doing on our KPIs or benchmarks? And are we on or off target? I think a lot of things, what we miss too is what impacts did we see that we weren't tracking? So let's say we rolled out a process and people started leaving the company. I don't know, hopefully that would never happen, but maybe we didn't see that churn would be an issue. And so making sure that we are constantly having data in front of us, that we're also capturing data. One, not only will help us understand if we are successful, but also giving visibility into the organization as to the impact that they're making. And that is throughout, I think, the whole process, and then reporting on that throughout that kind of long tail adoption post-process rollout.
There seems to be like a really common theme, which is like contextualized learning and having that constant communication and embracing the idea of champions. So that's really cool. Okay, so Laura, what would you say that if there is any key considerations that are really important, but a lot of people overlook when it comes to process changes?
Yeah. I thought about this a lot, and I think that it does go back to my first point of allowing and acknowledging that people are going through a change. They need space to flush it out, whether it's, yay, I'm super happy, this is everything I've always wanted, thank you RevOps, usually never get that, or I really hate it in the moment and I just need to feel my feels, because ultimately, we are, as like I said, as humans, we are not processing that change, and as managers, we're not allowing that space to happen. So talking through it. And like I said, it could be very big, like going through an acquisition, or very small. I think acknowledging that some people are just going to adopt earlier or not, and giving that space to people. We come from a revenue ops organization, and usually the people that are in these roles are very process driven, literal, left brain. I think tapping into that right brain, human emotion is super imperative.
Okay, so having that emotional response, letting them have their space, whether it's good or bad, just let them feel.
Yeah. And then also on our side, I think every time we're rolling out a process, we're like, I hope I thought of everything. And so there's a humbleness on this side that if something fails, that's on us. And so making sure that, we're giving ourselves space for feedback, that when we are going to roll out another process earlier, or being approachable in having some sort of like, I don't want to call it like a post rollout feedback session, but like taking feedback from all the stakeholders that were involved and saying, what can we do better next time? So I don't know if that's happening often enough, because we are moving at an incredible pace these days. And so from a RevOps perspective, it's like taking a pause and saying, what feedback do I need to get? How can I be better? And potentially, if you're making it in real time, making that change or applying that to the next process that we're, potentially going to tackle and change.
Mm-hmm. So what you said before about just having plan A, plan B, plan C, and just keep constantly reflecting on what's working, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there's one last question I did want to ask you, which was, if you were in a room full of revenue leaders, what's that one burning question that you'd want an answer to?
Oh man, how do you keep your day organized? No,
Okay.
it is true though. I think actually one thing is how I feel like revenue operations, this role has existed for a while, but it has never been called out within an organization. It's kind of like this new CRO or revenue operations title. Usually we were sales ops before. And so I would be curious, in a hyper growth company, what are like the ways to scale and hire and grow your revenue operations organization? Knowing that, if every company is doing things differently. So it's not like a cookie cutter, like you do the X, Y, and Z, but really like, what is the philosophy and approach of like hyper growth scale for a revenue operations company that's, less than 100 people? Because what I'm coming up against, and I would love to hear from other peers, is one, how do you keep your day organized? Because there are a million priorities and we just only have so many hours in the day. And how do you help prioritize your time and your projects? Is it based on impact? Is it based on mission? And then how do you scale that in like a 1 to 3 year time frame? I think that it would be a really good discussion, because many people approach it different ways, and there are many ways to be successful in it.